Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second in the series of webinars based on the subject of drainage and flood modelling. I'm Peter Coombs, and I'm based here in Newbury with my colleague Ludmila Fadeva, who will be running the webinar alongside me here today. For those that didn't log into the first webinar, don't worry, we're running a series, but we'll do a little recap and bring people up to speed as to where we're at with our modelling. In this particular webinar, we're looking at the impact of new developments, but equally this will apply to looking at analysing flooding of existing communities and neighbourhoods as well, as we'll show in the live demonstration in a little while. So the agenda for the webinar today is, after the introduction, I'll do a very quick recap on the guidance documents that we're referring to and did in the previous webinar. The Thatchum case study, I'll just set the scene on that to orientate people before I hand over to Ludi, who will run through a live demonstration of the software. The guidance document that we refer to, and this has been out for quite some time now, is Syria C624. Now, I really like this document because there are some very good parallels to be drawn out of this, whether, as I say, you're working on analysing existing flooding or looking at an impact of a new development upon an existing catchment. There's a pretty comprehensive review on how to run through a series of levels of flood risk assessment. In the first one, we ran a level 1, which was just using some basic information. Ludi set up a Watercourse, but now we're going to go down to the level 2 kind of level, and that is adding in a little bit more detail, but not the full detail of the networks within this Thatchum case study that we'll utilize. What we're trying to do is develop sustainable developments, and this is whether it's a new development or putting existing systems back onto a sustainable footprint. With the software that we're using, which is XPSWM, we are specifically focusing on the flows in the fluvial river watercourses. We're looking at extreme overland flow routes, the pluvial flooding. We're adding in details about the artificial drainage systems, and I know this slide is at a high level. I'll drill into the detail in a second, and also how things can affect the infrastructure, the existing infrastructure can affect the failures. So looking at the level 2 guidance, if I just drill in a little bit, running through the flow chart, the key thing here is to realize that if we cannot satisfy the approving authorities at an early stage with our new development design, this could severely impact the actual going ahead of the development itself. We may have to consider alternative sites, or you may have to go back to the drawing board and produce a new proposal. So what we're trying to do now is to speed up that process for you, enable you to provide that particular evidence. If I drill down to the next level on the flowchart, I particularly like this because it covers not just the flood risk for the development, and for that you could also replace flood risk for the existing neighbourhood if you're looking at existing flooding, but also when we put in measures to mitigate against flooding on a new development, or sorry, on an existing development, then that could increase the flood risk either upstream or downstream. So with this particular flowchart, it really helps us to focus on not just the localized flooding area potential, but also the upstream and the downstream conditions. And as I mentioned in the previous slides, we are focusing specifically on the fluvial, the pluvial, so in other words, extreme overland flood routing, as well as flooding from artificial drainage systems and flooding due to infrastructure failures. These are the key components that we're modeling within XPSWM. In this particular instance, we're not looking at flooding from the sea, we're not looking at tide-locked situations or groundwater rising up from below. So just to recap or introduce folks that were not in the previous webinar, and again, we will be recording this, by the way, and for those that would like to see the previous webinar, we did make a recording, so just feel free to email and we'll send you the link. But the Thatchum situation occurred in July of 2007. Thatchum is just located to the east of Newbury by 5 kilometres, about 15 minutes to the east of Newbury, where Lud is pointing the mouse to right now in the middle of the map. And what happened is we had a series of rainfall events that built up virtually daily for about a week, and it saturated the land. And then on the 20th of July, we had a very extreme rainfall event. It lasted for 6 hours, and it was a 1 in 251 year return period. Now, that really was the straw that broke the camel's back, and the ground being saturated to the north of the town just created a lot of overland flood flows and pluvial flooding, which we'll see in the next particular shot. This is a couple of roads where you have a side road coming in from the right-hand side, meeting a main road. And these were parents of children who were asked by the school to come and collect their children at around about midday. And this shot was taken at around about 2:30 in the afternoon, with the cars being washed down the road. So looking at the aerial photograph of Thatchum, to the north and to the northeast of the site specifically, this is the higher land. It's hilly. It's not mountainous, but it's hilly. And this was the area that became particularly saturated. And then when we had this one-off event, the runoff just ran from the north and the northeast through the town and down towards the southern end of the site. Now, at the southern end of the site, where the mouse is running here right now, this is a railway embankment. It's not cutting, it's a railway embankment. So that was built in the 1800s, and that's raised above the topography. So the flow across the land is coming down through the town and then hitting that man-made dam, in effect. And south of that particular railway embankment, we also have a watercourse, the River Kennet, and there is an outfall from the eastern end of the town. So the eastern end of Thatchum was developed. This is the latest part of the town to be developed, and we're now going to look in a little bit more detail at that flooding which occurred on the 20th of July in 2007. So we'll look at the fluvial. We're putting flows into the watercourse to the south of the railway embankment. We're looking at the extreme overland flow that ran down through the town. We've added in some of the artificial drainage systems, some of the larger elements, but not all. This is a level 2 assessment that we're running through today. And we're also looking at how things can affect, how that infrastructure can affect when they fail. We have a detention basin in this particular case, and this is a shot of an outfall pipe from that detention basin. And you can see what will happen if you don't maintain such systems, or you put in this case, a safety grid, but a poorly installed safety grid where we accumulate debris, and we can end up with culverts being blocked, silting up and things like that. Following the previous webinar, by the way, we had such a strong feedback from everyone saying, hey, this is typically what happens to us. You know, we end up with debris being washed down. We have shopping trolleys and things like that. How do we model culverts and major parts of the infrastructure system within the software? This is what we're going to run in the following webinar going on from this. So more towards a level 3, so more detailed design where we can set up a base scenario saying if the culvert was free flowing and well maintained, this would be the situation. And then we can put in sedimentation, say half full, 3/4 full, or completely blocked, and then run different scenarios. We'll be doing that in the next webinar. In this webinar, Ludi will also be looking at different scenarios on mitigation. So we've identified in the previous webinar the amount of flooding that we're getting across the ground, and now Ludi is going to add in some detention basins, but also we're working on many schemes, for example, in the Middle East, where we're putting in some temporary measures as well as some permanent measures. It's a balancing act with the economy, so maybe we can put in some basins on the surface to reduce the majority of the flooding, but not for all eventualities. What happens when you do end up with a very extreme event? You may have to put in some temporary pumps, for example. So Luda set up a model to show us how to do that. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to my colleague Ludmila Fedeva, and we'll take a look at the software live. So over to you, Ludi.
Thank you, Peter. What I will do first, I will recap very quickly on what we did in the first webinar. So guys who haven't joined the first one can have an idea of what were the results of what we have done. So basically we have set it up a watercourse which is running south of the town, with some user inflows and some catchments connected to the watercourse. And at the northern part of the town, we have applied rainfall on grid, which is a 2D function of XPSWMM software. So basically, it wetted every cell underneath this hatched area, and then we just monitored how the water runs down and what happens. So we did run the simulation for 1.5 days, and this is our maximum depth and water extent. It very well repeats the insurance map, which was claimed back in 2007. So there are certain shapes, U-shape, V-shape, and a U-shape in here. So this pretty much shows the existing scenario. And if I zoom a bit in here, you can see that there is some more water depth in this location rather than anywhere else. This is where the detention area is. So if I just click water depth and go to the end of simulation in the model which we ran last month, we can see that the water is slightly less than it was in maximum water depth map, but it is still standing. So basically, because we didn't add any drainage systems, we didn't add any pumps or any other infrastructure to help to release the inundation and to release the flooded water from the town. It's just standing there, and the main reason is because it's trapped in between the hilly area and the railway embankment at the bottom. So first thing what I want to show you today is how to import a microdrainage network into XPSWM model. So if we just go import, export data, there is a nice button, import MDX data, which is a microdrainage file. If I click open, I select a file, I click open, and then I just wait. And depending obviously on how many objects you have within your file, it either may take a second or it may take up to 5-10 seconds to load it in. So once we have this data in, we can cross-check what actually has been brought inside. So let me just untick background image for a better presentation. If I select all this network and click on a long section, so you can see this is a drainage system with different diameters. There is a smaller pipe at the upstream end and some bigger pipes and a downstream end. At the moment, this hasn't been simulated, so there is no water shown in this network, but we have a separate model set up where everything has been simulated already. So when you have drainage system data in a microdrainage format, you can bring it in. Apart from physical parameters of pipes, invert, and cover levels, it will bring over your areas in hectares, which you have specified, your catchment areas, which you have specified in microdrainage. Basically, as well, this information is automatically going through. The other options of bringing in data could be importing external database. So if you have an external database of manhole levels, invert levels, easting, northing locations, cover levels, and some other criteria, diameters of your network, you can connect your external database to the model, and it will build a network based on the data. As well, you have an option to import land XML files if you have any. And if you have any data in GIS, you can just import from GIS. So every layer, which is on the left-hand side, you can import items from GIS, right? So you don't need to redraw them, you can just bring them in. But today I will show you how you can as well draw items in the model. So you can see that I have brings forward on only a small part of a drainage system. So say if you don't have any design done yet, but you need to do your flood risk assessment, what you can do, you can build your drainage network within XPSWM. So it will be a high level just to identify that there is some system underneath, just to account for storage and some water conveyance to actually see a more detailed representation of how it will be in real life. We can just select the river tool and draw a few lines with few manholes. I just do that, and then I can connect it to my microdrainage import. So what I need to do at this point, I have drawn all these new items. So first I would like to ask the software to define ground elevations for my manholes. So I would like to generate ground elevations from thin. So I will do it for selected elements only. So if I scroll down, these are my selected elements. So see, they have all the elevation is 0. I click OK. Now if I double click, so there is a level within a manhole. So the next thing I need to identify is my head manhole invert level. So I would put it down as 77. I say OK. And then if I just select from my upstream manhole the location where my microdrainage import is, because at this moment this network has no levels, and I can do one thing. I can go modify elevation and generate intermediate inverts. So what I'm saying, please calculate me the intermediate invert levels in between these 2 points. And I click OK. So it changed 8 nodes and 9 links levels. So now if I do select from the top of my network to the bottom of it and click on dynamic long section, you can actually see that it has generated the inverts in between. So if I just do few, like less amount of manholes, so this looks better. But what we haven't changed yet is the diameter, right? So the diameter at the moment isn't set up. So if I go and set up my diameter, let's say I will say that for this particular pipe is 250. You can either set it up through individual links, or you can create an XP table where you can adjust them in a more better way, let's say. So I have changed one diameter, and now we can see in the long section that this diameter has been changed. So basically, you can quite quickly draw some new drainage networks just to have a feeling of what will happen if there is a drainage system in your area. Before going to detailed design, and then actually after you have done the detailed design and you do your flood risk assessment, you may realize that something is wrong. So before going to detailed design stage, you can just do some preliminary items and sizing in here. The other thing, as you remember, we did mention that there is a detention basin, right? So this is a detention basin which is located at the east side of the town. And what I would like to do is, I'm not sure if my DTM is quite good, right? So when the LiDAR flew over, what may happen, they didn't cut the grass in the detention basin and LiDAR picked the wrong level, or my detention basin has been changed over time and my LiDAR data is old, or there may be different reasons why you're not sure or you don't like the level. So there is a way how you can tweak a level within the model using some topography tools. So all I need to do is create a fill area layer under topography. And by selecting a polygon tool, I can just draw a hatch on top of this detention basin. And the software will allow me to change the topographical level of this hatched area. So if I move my mouse, you can see it's 65.2.4, but actually I know it's 64.5, right? So you can adjust it to one object, to few objects selected which were drawn under this layer, or to all objects. So this tool can be used to cut a hole in the ground, if you like, or it can be used opposite, to actually define a threshold level of a building or a structure. So say for this detention basin, I would like it to be lower to contain more water because my topography is incorrect, but for a building in here somewhere, I would like it to act differently. So if I just hatch a house, and if I'm, okay, the topography says it's 65.75. So I think, or I know that my threshold level is 65.85. So what will happen when the water will start moving overland? As soon as it hits the detention basin, or this hatch, it will start filling it in till it's completely full, and only then it will flow out. But in case of the building itself, what will happen? The water will flow around the building till the moment when the threshold level is hit, and only then it will flood on top. So this is the way how you can define your flooded postcodes if you need. Again, under this layer, you can import items from GIS. So you don't need to draw every building manually. If you have a CAD data, you can convert it to GIS and then bring it in. If you have GIS data, then you can just bring it in. Okay. So what I will do now, I will go to a second model, which was set up with few more items. So what I did in here is, first I analyzed how the water is flowing from hilly areas towards the town and what are the main flood paths. And on these flood paths, if we just go back for a second to a previous model, if I click maximum water depth. So there are some flood paths and water paths, so the way the water is moving. So I just put in a couple of detention areas, which are not very deep, say just like say half a meter, just to retain some of the water and make it so the flooding is not as heavy within the town. So there are 3 detention areas outside of the town, and obviously the small detention area which we just drew together. As well, there is an imported network from MicroDrainage and a network which we just drew together as well in here. The last thing I did is, so some detention ponds or detention areas, they will hold some water, the drainage system will collect the water, but there is this area in here which is undeveloped land at the moment, and it is a low point, right? So, and the water just keep coming here and it's keep ponding. There is a railway next to it, and basically it can't leave, and there is no drainage system because there is no development. So what I did, I dropped a pump, a temporary pump in this location where the water is ponding, and I'm pumping it out to the river. Right, so your pump, you can model pump as being a part of your drainage system, or you can model pump as being temporary setup. So it doesn't matter. The good thing is that you can model a pump flow. So if I click maximum water depth at this point, we won't see much different from a previous picture. But the main difference is if we go the previous model and if we click water depth and go the end of the simulation, which is 1.5 days, the water is still standing because there is no system to remove the water. But if I go to this new model, which I set it up, and I go maximum water depth, and I go the end of the simulation, we have a slightly different picture. There is water which is retained in my detention areas, and there is only some minor flooding left along the town. So if I play it from the beginning, time-wise, we can see how the water moves. Right, so the water, it starts raining, the water starts moving, but then the rain stops, but the water is still moving, but the drainage system is collecting the water, the pump is pumping, and basically over time, we pause it, it's 16 hours, we have our detention basins full, because the flood event, the rainfall event was 6 hours, so 16 hours is 10 hours after. We still have standing water in places and the water is still moving, but it's much clearer than it was in the previous model where we had no collection or pump system or detention ponds inside. So now if we go to a hydraulic part of it. So what was done in terms of a drainage system? So the drainage system was set up such way that it can capture the 2D inflow, right? So there is no catchment connected to any of the nodes of these drainage systems. because we don't know what catchments will contribute, so we would like the model to actually estimate how much water will go in. So if I select downstream objects, and if I look at the long section, if I play it, we can see that there is water coming in from surface, and it joins the river. In terms of location where your pipe joins to the watercourse, there are a few ways how you can avoid backflows. So one way is you will say that it will flow downhill only, or the other way is you can put an orifice on the end, what is done in this one. So there is, instead of just a pipe, there is an orifice in there. So you can have an orifice either same diameter as your pipe or different diameter, smaller if you would like to release the discharge. And then in here, you tick that there is a flap. Okay, it will allow you to remove some backflow from the river if you would like to remove it. If you would like to see how actually the water flows back into your drainage system, if you have a free outfall without any flap valve, then you can model that. And if we just look at the other drainage system, if we select downstream objects and go to section as well, so there is quite a steep hill and quite a small scale, so it looks dramatic, but it's not in the real life. But I have an orifice in here. My orifice is smaller than my diameter because, again, one of the ways to model the blockage is to actually put an orifice to just restrict your flows in terms of orifice. But we have other options within the software as well where you can actually make the conduits blocked. So if I just select a conduit and go to conduit factors. So in here, what you can do, there are a few nice items. You can either define different roughness within your conduit. So you may say that the roughness till certain depth is such, and after this depth is different. So if you have an old sewer systems, which may have some sediment which cannot be flushed away anymore, and the roughness coefficient is different, you may use it. As well, you may have different numbers of barrels, so which means it will put in parallel, say 2, 3, 4 pipes in parallel of the same diameter and same level, and you can have a sediment depth. So if you choose a sediment depth, then it will block the conduit with a sediment for a certain depth you define. As well, you can adjust some entrance-exit loss coefficient and a few more items. But for that particular pipe, if I would like to block it, I may just put 0.5 meter of sediment, depending obviously on your pipe diameter, and then when the model will run, it will consider that half a meter of the capacity is taken by sediment. If we focus a little bit on end of simulation, so this detention area, at the moment it's showing the water depth of 1 meter, and the water depth around for these properties is 40-30 centimeters. From data which was recorded few days after the event, so basically we had human witness who was Peter, who drove past this detention pond on a Sunday afternoon, when the event happened Friday afternoon, so it's 2 days after. He was saying that there was a standing water over 1 meter within the detention pond. And as well, the properties around it were flooded. So our end of simulation is 1 day, 11 hours, 58 seconds, so which is 1.5 days, and we still have standing water in this location. So which is in line with real time event. So the last item I would like to show you is the pump. So I did put a pump in here. And if we just review some results of the pump. So this is how my level in the node changed. So the water would come in, go to a certain level, the pump would kick in. This is my rising main. In here I can review the flows. So I can see when and how much my pump was pumping. So, and it was pumping all the way to the next day. So even after midnight, there was still some pumping happening. How do I set up a pump? Within the multi-link tool, same location where we did put an orifice, you can put a pump. And when you put a pump, you have different options. You can have pump rated by dynamic head, static head, well volume, depth in node, and then you can generate different pump types. So you can put in your pump rating curve and define how your pump pumps. You can have few pumps in parallel, so you can have one more pump, and you can have a conduit and a pump and an orifice and a weir and some special items like hydro brakes or some user-defined weirs within the same location, but you can have only up to 7 flow controls. So at the end of my flood risk assessment, what I would possibly like to do is to check my upstream river levels and my downstream river levels. How do they change due to all this extra water coming in? So I would use tables for that, and I would read my maximum water depth, my maximum water elevation, and if I have any flooding, and so on. So if you have different scenarios or different mitigation measures, you can compare the levels. How does it affect the watercourse? How does it affect the spread? How does it affect the inundation? And that's it. Thank you very much. It's all from my side for today.
Thank you, Ludi. I hope that really helps you to understand how we can cover those flood risk assessment capabilities down to a level 2 of detail rather than the level 1 we covered initially. Next time, as I mentioned, we'll be looking at level 3, so really getting into the detail in a specific area. But that was great. Thanks, Ludi, and I hope you can see how that increased accuracy and the extra detail can help you to validate and calibrate your models, and also run a range of different scenarios to replicate those different types of realities that can actually happen on site. We can always adjust, and we're not limited to the number of scenarios, but it will just depend on the size of the model as to how many scenarios you kind of like to run, because of the sheer run times, as it were, to run the analysis. On that particular model, Ludi, how long did it take to run the analysis we did earlier on?
So the first model we did run with multiple grid cell sizes. We had one area with 50 by 50 and the town area 5 by 5, and it took over 12 hours.
Yeah.
And in the second model, I have reduced the town grid cell size to 10 by 10, and it took less than an hour.
Yeah, so you can see the kind of range of timings available. So typically what we like to do is identify with a rough grid, if you like, to identify those kind of stormwater hotspots and where the flooding is likely to occur. And then we drill down in more and more detail on a smaller localized level, would kind of make sense. But we could do it on a larger scale. It'll just take a longer time to run. Just to give you an update now on what's happening in the next month or so, we do have running some microdrainage training running here between the 10th and the 13th of August. And the next webinar will be on the 9th of September because of holiday commitments and what have you. Eid Mubarak to all of our friends out there who are enjoying their Eid holiday right now. I hope you're having a good time. I noticed a lot of familiar names. It's great to have you on board. But Eid Mubarak, and I think a lot of people will be actually taking annual leave after Eid over the next few weeks. So we're putting it back until the 9th of September and after the training sessions as well. I'll be running the Middle Eastern training session towards the end of August, and again in September is the way it's looking right now. No firm dates on that, but I'll keep you all posted, and it would be great to meet up when I'm in Eastern Province in Saudi and over in Doha. We're also running some training in Dublin at the Red Cow Moran Hotel. So if you're interested in training in the area of Ireland again, we're running between the 8th and the 10th of September. Courses A, B and F, the design fundamentals of microdrainage and SUDS drainage design. So thank you one and all for attending and participating in the webinar. I've answered just one of the questions, but I'm going to run through all the different questions offline and produce a frequently asked question spreadsheet. We've done it for the previous one. There are a couple of things we just need to polish off, and then we'll send that out to everyone. We have made a recording of this webinar, so we'll edit it and post it up onto the website and let you know where the link is so that you can review and replay it at your leisure. And we'll do a frequently asked question fact sheet from this webinar too. Any queries, feel free to email Ludmilla or myself. So there's ludmilla.fadeva showing on the screen there at xpsolutions.com, or myself, peter.coombs@xpsolutions.com. And we'll be issuing CPD certificates after the webinar, and also a very brief survey monkey, because we really do appreciate your feedback. It helps us to put in the content that you're looking for your particular projects to help you on future schemes. Meanwhile, have a great summer, and we'll speak to you all again in early September.
Thank you for joining, and have a good holidays, guys.
Okay, happy holidays. Bye-bye.
Bye.